Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the basics of operating the Workingtitle GPS. Now the cool thing here is they were nice enough to actually give us two different versions of the Workingtitle GPS. We have the 530 model and of course we have the 430 model. Now one of the cool things is in one of the aircraft I fly in the real world, we actually have one of these, so it's actually kind of neat. One thing I want to give you a quick little warning about, and let me switch to my desktop mode real fast to demonstrate this, is if you actually hold down the Alt key and you click on the center display, you can actually bring up a mini version of the GPS screen. So if I actually expand it, you can see this. So if you're a big fan of having like a third monitor, or you just want to have like a generic moving map, you can stick that there. And one of the reasons I love that is you can do this, which means now you can actually open that sucker up, pop it over in sort of a generic sort of a way if we want to kind of keep an eye on it when we're doing our VFR flying kind of a thing. Keep in mind, this will suck down a little bit of system resources to operate. Another thing I want to say too, before we get too carried away with this device, is be mindful of the fact that sometimes it will conflict with the avionics of certain third-party aircraft. So just kind of be aware of that. All right, so first things first, we've got ourselves the aircraft all start up. RAIM is passed, which is basically an analysis to make sure everything works. Let's take a look at the basic functionality of this device. Now we've covered the GPS before, but there's a couple different things that kind of makes this a little bit neater, and like I said, we'll play with it. First things first is understanding the differences between these two knobs. That whether or not you're using the GPS 530 up here or the GPS 430 does not make a difference. They're both going to have the same personality. Now, if you're flown back in the old days, like I used to, and with the KLN 90, it was the same concept. This guy over here is always responsible for communication. This one over here is always responsible for navigating the pages of the GPS itself. Now, if you take a look up here, you'll notice that I've got this little blue text around this little box. That is the currently highlighted changeable value. So if I wanted to change, for example, I wanted to go to a local frequency, I'd take the big knob here and hold my mouse over it, roll my mouse wheel, or if you prefer, you can click, and then I would go ahead and just roll it to the frequency I want it. Now you'll notice by holding my mouse over the big part of the knob, it's the big numbers. If I hold myself over the little part of the knob, it's going to give me the little numbers. So you can see here I'm at 122.700. Now if I want to commit that frequency so I can actually utilize it, I just come over here and press the swap button. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, wait a minute, you changed it up here. Why is this one not changing? Well, this one's a separate radio. And as a matter of fact, if I zoom out just a tiny bit more, you're going to notice that we have two different comm radios. Thanks for that one, Microsoft. And we have, of course, different nav radios and everything along those. We can also shut off the marker beacon if we don't want to listen to it. Now, the reason this is valuable is if I wanted to, for example, put the ATIS on the other one, I could grab my other GPS, come in here, and I could actually dial in whatever appropriate ATIS that I need. We'll do 11815 here, swap it. Now, the reason we don't hear anything, of course, is I'm a little out of range of that particular frequency. But the other thing, too, is if I come up to COM2, I don't actually have it on. So I'd have to press that button to actually be able to hear it, and I can press that again. Now, you're going, well, that makes sense. That's not so bad at all. What if we want to go ahead and change our VOR? Well, if you notice on the front of this button, it says push C/V. When you press that button, it's going to swing down here, allowing you to set your VOR. And again, the rule is the same. The big guy is going to be the big numbers. The little guy is going to be the little numbers. So in this case, if we wanted to do 115.60, which is not too far from here, I could press the frequency swap. By the way, everybody loves to accidentally press this button, so be careful on it. And you'll notice immediately it's going to go ahead and identify the VOR for us automatically. Nice. It'll also go ahead and select the appropriate radial that we're currently on, and it'll give us a distance, which is about 13.4 nautical miles. Now notice that's a difference between these two units. Now if I were to come down here and do the exact same thing, let's say I'm going to go to 115.60 down here, because why not? Boop, right there, swap. You'll notice we get none of the doodads and doohickeys that help us out. That's just because there's more screen estate up here on the GPS 500. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the buttons that we have along the bottom. Again, they're going to be basically the same sets of buttons, regardless of kind of what you're doing here. The first one we have is what they call CDI. And what this does is this allows you to select what navigational source your primary CDI is going to be operating. Now, one of the nice things about this particular version of the Cessna is this GPS is linked to this CDI, this GPS is linked to this CDI. So right now it says the letters GPS on it, meaning it's using the GPS's signal to drive this particular display. Now, if I were to come over here and click it, you'll notice it goes to VLOC, which is basically letting us know that we can now use VOR or we can use localizer for the purposes of feeding this particular instrument navigational things. One of the nice things, too, is it'll actually warn you up here that you've swapped modes, so just be mindful that you're not on the wrong frequency here. Now, of course, if I came in here and I wanted to tweak it, by the way, notice the 164 radial. So if I were to come in here, oh my gosh, I feel like they've made this even slower. Come on, come on. So how y'all doing today? A fun thing in the real plane, the only thing I use this instrument for is for the purposes of keeping track of how many landings I did. Ding! And you'll notice this is perfectly centered because we were on that radial already. And we also notice that the distance is 13.4. Remember, the slant distance. For another day. Now, you're probably saying, well, wait a minute. What if I want to set this one to... You can. So we can actually have two separate signals here, which if you really want to confuse yourself to death, and most airplanes don't support this, we could come in here, hit direct, select an airport that's separate from the airport we have on the bottom. So it's a fantastic way to confuse the heck out of yourself. So be very mindful of that when you're doing it. All right, the next button we have here is OBS. That is the suspend option. Now, if I press this, it's going to tell me that OBS is not available. The reason it's not available is because I do not have a current waypoint selected. What this does is this suspends waypoint sequencing. Now you're sitting there going, wait, what? It simply means that when you cross a waypoint, instead of going to the next waypoint, by pressing OBS, it'll say SP, and that'll prevent us from recognizing the next one over. To the right of that is the MSG button. This one provides you with some very yummy food in the event that you're hungry during. No, this is the message button. This will let you know if you're entering airspaces, crossing airspaces, in airspaces. It'll also give you some warnings if you pick the wrong kind of a direction with your CDI here. Next one is the FIPL button. This is the same on both devices. Notice, by the way, we have a copy of it down here. Press FIPL, and this will allow us to enter our active flight plan. Now, seeing as this is just an overview video, I'm not going to go too far in here, but the very short version is, if you come here, you press cursor, scroll to the one you want, use the little one to go ahead and select the location that you want, which apparently is in the middle of Russia in this case. Remember, if you ever get stuck, you can always come over here and I'll press and hold on the clear button, and what that will do is if you hang on it long enough, it'll go ahead and bring you back to the main page. Now, one difference you'll notice between these two, and like I said, sticking to the overview today, is this one has the VNAV option and this one does not. That is not a surprise. VNAV is a tricky tool because basically it's only going to help you descend. It's never going to help you ascend. It does tie into the automatic pilot, assuming you have a VNAV option, which as you can see, we don't. So unfortunately, as wonderful as that button is, we'd have to kind of play with it and allow this to kind of dial some items in. Fortunately for us, there's some good calculations in here. The next button to the right is the proc button. These are going to be procedures. What I'm going to do is just temporarily go ahead and pick a location that we're going to fly to. We'll keep it nice and easy today. We'll go up to a PVD, which is a very short flight for us. Papa Victor Delta, and by the way, the numbers are down. Again, same rule, big letters. This is moving our location. Little guy is going to be the little numbers. There is no Control Z here, so be very careful when you're moving that mouse wheel, especially if you have one like me. PVD, that looks good. I'm just going to press the Enter key. I'm going to press Activate. Beautiful! So as soon as I did that, by the way, you probably observed the fact that everybody kind of jumped and made all sorts of things. By the way, I can suspend now. Pretty cool, huh? Now, one of the things you probably noticed when I pressed the suspend button, by the way, let me zoom out a little bit for you so you can see it. Do you see how it kept the line as if it was a straight line, which makes it very easy to follow it very precisely if you're doing an instrument approach. So that's, again, a quick little thing about the suspend button that you have over there. Now, if I press the proc button, you're probably going to observe that we have a couple different options here. And again, we'll go into more detail with this with a separate video. But the key thing here is we have our approach, arrival, and our departure. So now let's say we want to do a specific approach. Come up here, press Enter. We can now pick which one we want to use. And one of the cool things is, let's say we want to do ILS runway 5 here. Press Enter, is you can actually preview the different options by grabbing the little knob and just kind of hitting a different one. So in this case, vectors would just mean point us there. You have Lefay, you have Enter. So I can come up here, I can hit cutesy, I can say, that's not really what I wanted. Go back up here. Again, I'm using this one to jump between these two pages. Go ahead and wiggle. Let's try a PVD instead. That's going to be a procedure turn. Ew, gross. Nobody likes procedure turns. Let's pick cutesy because cutesy has an awesome name to it. That looks pretty good. Now we can come up here and then activate. Now, one of the cool things is just like in the real world, it's going to warn you that you can't fly an ILS approach using the GPS guidance. Just one of those things. I'm going to go press yes. And you'll notice it automatically imported everything into our flight plan. If we had something past this flight plan, of course, it does it. And one of the nice things, and we'll talk about this in another video, is it actually lets you know what the different components of your waypoints are, which makes your life so much simpler as far as that goes. Now, some people get trapped in this page, so I'm going to press the FIPL button to go ahead and cancel it. And you can zoom out and you can see it gave us this beautiful procedure turn that got McKenty, and it brings us all the way down to the ground. Continuing our journey, up in the top right corner, of course, this will be the same depending on which GPS you have. It's the same idea. Is the range option. This gives you the ability to go ahead and zoom in and out on the map. One thing you got to watch out for is you zoom way out. Of course, things are going to get a lot smaller and it's going to be kind of cluttered. One of the tips I offer people is that things get cluttered. If you press the CLR button, you can actually adjust how much detail there is on a map. You'll notice this little -3 that I have here in the corner. By pressing that, this is maximum detail. I can press clear a couple more times and go to minimum detail. All these airspaces spaces and stuff, by the way, can be turned off. I will show you again how to do that in a slightly different video. All right, let's zoom back in. Again, this is the same for both devices here. I like it just on clear 3. It's just simple. We have the menu option. The menu option is fantastic. It gives you a lot of control. Again, the setup map option is super duper detailed. But one thing I want to share with you in the setup map option is if you go to the tippy top, if you scroll down, you can change your orientation. So if you want to be track up instead of north up, it'll actually make the GPS point in the direction you're going. This is the correct way to use GPSs, by the way. Now, there's always a fun little discussion about that. There's also some interesting information here that you can turn on and off, which I just find kind of interesting. I'm going to shut the aviation data off. Why would you do that? Don't worry about it. It's not going to cause us any issues. If we need to get out of that, of course, we can go ahead and go back to the top of the menu. We can press the enter key here. We can hit our menu. We can change anything. You can also change your fields. I'm going to get into this a little bit later. I don't want to go too crazy here because, again, tapping that clear key will bring us out. Our last 2 buttons here are going to be our direct to option. What this does is this enables us to immediately pick a waypoint. Now, what you'll notice right now is it's got this little funky symbol on here. The reason it's doing that is because this is part of our existing flight plan. If I were to come over here, select where it says cutesy, and go ahead and give this thing a wiggle, I can now dial in a new waypoint. The other thing worth noting, let me go ahead and press enter real quick here. I'll go ahead and exit out of the page. If I go down to where it says FPL, and I go ahead and roll my middle one, you can actually pick what runway point you want to go direct to. So, for example, if they call us up and say, could you go direct Kent? You're like, oh, yeah, I can go direct Kent. Bup, 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 bup. And now if you take a look at that, our aircraft is now direct Kent in the middle of our instrument approach, which is a nice little tip there. We'll talk more about this tool a little later on. Our last option we have is this big old guy right here, and this allows us to select between different pages if we are not in our primary mode here. Again, this is the same on both of these devices. So now if I take the big knob, if you take a look down here, nav is our group of pages. These little nubs right here are individual pages. So if I grab this thing and go one to the left, it's going to do absolutely nothing. The reason why is on account of the fact that, whoops, helps if you do it one to the left properly, we're already on the nav page, which is as far to the left with the big pages as we can go. Now if I go one to the right, it's going to bring us to the detail pages. And you're going to notice there's an enormous amount of detail down here. If I go one to the right again, you'll notice it gives me some fun little options here. One of the things I get such a kick out of here. By the way, if you want to select any of these, you can just go ahead and click on that, press the enter key, and now you can dial in all your different things to calculate your fuel. Again, this takes weeks of videos to go over some of these little details here, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. Present position. I love how it does that. Go away. We don't need that. So now we'll go ahead and go one more. Whoop, shut off my cursor there. One more to the right gives us the nearest option. I'll go down here and show you that. And you can see exactly how it is. One really quick pro tip, which works great, is let's say we have an engine out and we need to land immediately. I can press cursor, come down to whatever option, let's say Quonset state, direct, enter. And just like that, I now have myself a brand new waypoint that's right in the way. Now, if we want to go back to our main page, shut off our cursor, go back a few just like this. And now you can see our original flight plan is still intact, but OQU, Quonset, like I said, is now our selected active point. Of course, we go in here and select instrument procedures and everything under the sun. So you can see how incredibly useful this particular tool is. Now we've seen the big pages, let's look at the little pages. These little nubs represent individual pages that we can access. Now, what I usually like to do is I like to go up here to the nav option. I like to actually go left here, and I actually can get myself different views. So I have kind of my primary navigational view. I have my secondary navigational view. You can see you get a slightly different level of detail. This is kind of like, to me, this is plan mode. Down here on the 430, you'll notice my page 1 of nav is just going to tell me all sorts of details like this. And you can see it automatically grabbed onto that original point because I didn't tell it to do anything otherwise. You'll notice that we have a couple different pages here. If I go to page 3, we have all sorts of interesting information about terrain. If I go to page 4, we're going to get a big angry standby warning. What is this about? This is traffic. Unfortunately, we have nothing here because our ADS is currently off. So if our ADS was on, we could actually see traffic around us. Now, if I go all the way to the end here, we have our ability to see which GPSs we're talking to. We also know what our current position is. And if you go all the way on this one, you're going to get vertical navigation information, which is the same as pressing this button right here. Coming over here, again, we'll take a look. You have the waypoint controls. The waypoints are awesome. They give you all sorts of detailed information as far as your particular target goes. And you can see just by kind of surfing through these, we can have a bunch of things. There's a lot of fun tweaks and kind of tricks in here and stuff like that, and I'll share that with a different video. Coming over to our final option page here, we have all these fun little options. AUX1, of course, is going to give you this. AUX2, you have a lot of really useful tools in the real world. We don't have to worry about things like this here. Where you can go to setup 1, where we can change all our units. Again, this is all for a completely of the day. There's so much information here that we can go over a little bit later on. And of course, we can come over here and experiment with some of the different options. Coming over to the nearest page, again, we're using the big knob for the big pages and the little knob for little pages. We can kind of cycle between these and see all the crazy different options. Now, you're probably going, wow, that's not too bad. This is a pretty slick device. What's the best way to get started with this thing? To be honest, press the direct key, pick a location, and kind of be on your way. Now, I just spent about $60 worth of fuel explaining all that. Good thing it's virtual fuel. In a future videos, we'll get into some of the minutia, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of preview of kind of some of the things that this really, really solid working title GPS has. Enjoy.